I don't know if it's like this for you, but when I go back home, nothing has changed. It's the same.
Totally.
It's the same, and it's like it makes me feel like, what the fuck?
Totally.
Nothing is changing here. People aren't trying to do anything different here.
Yeah, and then there were times, I would say, for the first year, I'd go back home and I would be almost resentful for people, where it's like, this is how I would look at people and be like, how are you still, air quotes, stuck doing that, or stuck doing this? Can't you see, and I would almost put myself on a pedestal, you guys are all stuck here doing the same shit, going to the same bars, and now I'm almost at a point where I almost and for a lack of a better way to put it, I almost feel not sympathy, but they have accepted that they're okay with that.
Yeah.
There's no reason for me to be resentful or look down on
if they're generally happy with
it. Yeah, because some people have that burning fire to go, and we were talking about this earlier, Los, of some people want to make a bunch of money. Well, that's how they're fulfilled. You are a poet and artist, and that's what fulfills you. So maybe the people who are still there are fulfilled with their family and 9 to 5 and coming home and raising kids, and
that's perfect for them.
And that's perfect for them. So there's now it's I don't resent anybody there or anything. It's that's just that's their life. Here's mine.
That also ties into what we were talking about earlier about just seeking to understand. Not trying to change people and the way that they look at things, but just okay, that's the way you look at it. This is the way I look at it. Let's keep moving.
Totally.
Because if you go back and you judge those people, you're no different than other people that do that. It's you're just coming from the other side of oh, did you? Why would I judge you for that? That's what you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Totally. And
it's so different than what you want to do now.
And it's really just anytime, if I'm judging them, I'm just projecting my own insecurities about who I am. And it has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Mine, if I judge those people, I almost feel a little bit jealous sometimes of how simple it can be for them to be satisfied. They don't need to make a bunch of money or need to do all these grand things, or not need to have that desire to. They love doing that job every day. And I'm like, God damn. Yeah. So simple.
That's a great point.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that our desires aren't bad. It's ours might be a little bit harder to achieve or take longer to achieve or to learn. I had that when I was at a coffee shop. I worked there, and I'd always subconsciously judge my coworkers. That's what they want to do forever, is make the best cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And I was like, such a low ambition, but I'm also we need coffee people, we need baristas.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting about your story and how it ties into other people's stories that are similar is, or at least speaking from my perspective and what I've seen, is we're usually not necessarily running towards something. We're usually running away from something in those beginning years. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've seen pretty consistently.
You're smiling.
He's
wait, call me out, Los.
Well, no, but I'm myself included, right?
Same.
Because
same.
You were looking for a way to be noticed, a way to stand out, right? And I know in my journey, I was I'm an only child, but I have a ton of cousins, and we all come from the same cloth, and we're all in the same little nook. And I was just I don't want to be here forever. So I was running away from something to become something, and then sort of figure out the next steps of the journey once I have enough distance behind me. I can figure out, okay, I'm here now. What do I want now? But the original impetus is let's just get as far away from here as I can.
Totally.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true for you as well in your own way?
It totally is. I think for me it took a little bit longer to come to terms with that, because even when I went to college, I chose a college that was comfortable. It was 2.5 hours from home, but it was that was the college where all of my buddies kind of went. So it was, I was leaving home, but I was still staying comfortable enough.
Yeah. You had a part of home with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't meeting brand new people. You didn't know you knew people there.
Yeah. I mean, my friend group freshman year was awesome. It stemmed from, they were, it was a branch off of my high school friend's roommate. So it was I was still almost running in the same, and that friend group they were all from a town that was the same size as mine. It was the same type of people.
Yeah.
Because I was just subconsciously choosing relationships that I was used to. And so it even after I left my town, it was about a year and a half before I actually started to run away from
all of that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to run away or relearn until you get yourself some distance. You don't realize, I'll speak for myself, how much you need to be like, oh my gosh, like your environment and who you're around and the worldview of the collective of who you're around is huge. And like the impact is nuts.
Was there a moment, so you just said like even when you got out for like a while, it was still a while before you really started to like sort of look, was there a moment or was there something that happened that caused you to like branch out and like look for the different communities? Or?
It's so funny how the world just conspires for you sometimes.
It really does.
It was so freshman year I got a sales job, and the sales job showed me this, and I recognize now looking back, like there was always this desire in me, and I didn't know really. I never in my life was like, I'm going to college to learn how to be a salesperson. But there was this, like looking back, in wood shop, I sold cutting boards. I sold these Carbowl boards. It was like a game board. I sold those. I was always collecting and selling football cards. In kindergarten, I said I'd be a car salesman. Like, I didn't know, but it was always there.
You said you wanted to be a car salesman in kindergarten?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never heard of kindergarten. I want to sell fucking cars at 3 years old.
So it was always there, but I consciously never thought I'd be and then I got this sales job, and then that was the first moment where I was like, whoa, this is a whole different world. Like, I can show up and get paid for my actual value. Like, there was no more clock in, brain on the shelf, clock out. It was like, this is actually a different world. So that led me to real estate investing and reading books, and like 10X, Grant Cardone was one of the first books I read. Yeah. And starting to think about the world a little bit differently. And then going into 2019, that school year, I was like starting to do a morning routine up in my room. I lived with 5 other dudes, so 6 of us in the house. And there was no joke. There was some mornings I'd get up to go to the gym. They would still be up, like drinking, partying from the night before. Like, that was the environment I was in.
Yeah.
And so I was at the end of the house, but I was like the odd man out. Like, I was doing different things, and then COVID happened, which was the best thing. Like,
we were talking about that the other day of how we know so many people that 2020 was the best year. And
COVID
it just shows like how different people can react to the same experience.
Dude, I am so grateful for COVID. Like, I can't even. My life is so different because COVID happened, and I was in a relationship at the time that was not a healthy relationship. She's awesome. If she ever hears this, she knows she's great, but that relationship wasn't good.
Right.
And so we broke up because of COVID. I moved back home into my town of 1,000 people. But that separation was so good because then I was out of an environment that was comfortable, and I was adapting to that college, like drinking every night type of thing. And I wasn't doing that, but that was all I saw. And you talked, Tim, you just said environment is so important. Yeah. So then I was in my parents' basement just grinding for like 8 months, basically by myself all day, every day during COVID.
In COVID. Yeah.
And that environment shift was so big for me. And then November of 2020, I had saved like $35,000 over the course of the summer of 2020. And I bought my house in St. Paul, which was a huge environment shift. That was like, actually, that's when I left the nest.
Yeah.
And that is
it's the end of 2020.
End of 2020. And that's when I started house hacking, and that's when like all the everything has kind of blossomed since then.
Yeah. So it was like 6 months of like being in the dirt, in your seeds, all nice and dark, and then like exploding up.
There's something to that aspect of the story, and even before the 2020 part, like living with those people. I wanted to step back and touch that because I think from what I've seen, we all go through that phase at some point, or a lot of us do, where we have to live with like a group that shows us how important like our habits are. That shows us how important, like, and also like how different how different we can be. Think of the discipline that it takes to live with 5 other dudes who are doing one thing and live with them and go against the grain of what they are doing. That teaches discipline to another degree. That teaches ambition to another degree, because you're like, no, I know what the fuck I want regardless of the resistance, right?
And no one else was in that house that could keep you accountable, I'm guessing. Like, no one else would have made sure you were up at 6 in the morning to go to the gym.
No shot.
Right? So,
No.
so it's on you.
Yeah.
That's actually a great perspective.
Yeah.
That is a great revealer of like my true desires was in that moment, in those moments.
Yeah, that leads to
Which
the
is
guy
pretty cool.
that gets here at 2 a.m., wakes up and goes and does his fasted cardio at 7 a.m. with his food stacked in the fridge. That leads to that. They're necessary parts. And then you go back in the cave, you go back in the dungeon, and you work and you grind, and that seed grows and you become out of it. Right?
And like, imagine the possibility of like what you're able to achieve in that environment with those 5 other dudes. Imagine what that could look like being surrounded by 500 dudes who are working just as hard or harder than you, which you may have found over the last couple of years with you and other people. But like, that's real powerful when you can surround yourself with those kind of people that are like, yo, did you get up today? Did you do this?
So that's been a great shift in the past year. So as far as environments go, like I've gone through each. So after I moved to the cities, I bought that house and I house hacked it to I had 3 roommates that were random, so they were off Facebook. And so I was isolated within my own home, not because of COVID, but because I didn't really know people. I was just in the city, and I'm a small town kid, and
I got a house apparently now.
And my roommates, like, we just all kind of like coexisted. If you ever lived in a situation like that, and like we were all just there, and we weren't friends, and that went on for 8 months. And again, I was just grinding like every day.
So what were you doing? What were you doing during those 8 months? Like selling stuff online? Like, what were you working on during that time?
I was actually in an apprenticeship role for about 14 months. So part of that transition, which I missed, was when I moved back home and was grinding in 2020. I also, that fall, I dropped out of college. So like I didn't go back to school.
I was about to ask where the college fits in and all that stuff.
Yeah, so fall 2020, I didn't go back to school. And I took kind of like an apprenticeship role with Dane Espegard, who's the guy I was telling you, my mentor with the Dreams List stuff.
Yeah.
And I apprenticed with him. I was basically his right-hand man from September of 2020 to April of 2022. So that was...
Just a couple months ago.
Yeah. So I worked really closely with him for very little pay. And... I learned so much, and we shipped a ton of business, and that was like a sacrifice period in my time that I wouldn't trade for the world. Like I learned so much, and I would almost encourage anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur. And what's funny too is I learned this from the guy we rented that house from, the roommates that all drank all the time.
Yeah.
When I went to pay my rent, we had to pay with paper checks, and I always struck combos up with the guy. His name is Jeremy Wise, and every time I dropped off a check, I'd ask a couple questions like, "How did you get that house? Like, how many do you have? Like, how'd you get into this? Like, where'd you learn about?" He'd give me book resources. He's who told me about Rich Dad Poor Dad, and so that guy told me. He said I dropped out of school. I apprenticed with it was a guy like a tax firm for a year, and he said that's the best decision I ever made. And I think not consciously, but that was in the back of my mind of like since he said that, and he had 12 houses in our college town or whatever. Yeah. I never hesitated to do the same thing. So I don't. Not that this is like anyone listening taking advice thing, but like man, to do an apprenticeship with somebody who's uber successful, which Dane is, he's like the best in our business for that long, like that has catapulted me at decades.
Oh, I can imagine. Just the knowledge, just witnessing probably what he can do in the world that he's made.
I've learned a lot just sitting here, like learning in real time about number one, the power of community and environment, but also just had it in my head. The things that like you don't necessarily know are going to be big and important in your life, like those little conversations with Jeremy.
Yeah.
You don't know that those are going to be important, right? Something just tells you like, oh, I should pay attention right now, right? And it's like this, the universe, God is guiding you in that way. It's like this is